So we're taking a look at Overlord tactics from the board gaming perspective. Now, I love dungeon crawling type games. I love dungeon delve type games. And this genesis, this love comes from, on the one side, we've got role-playing games. I love D&D. I love AD&D. I love the narrative, character development, fights, loot, boss monsters. But even if it's a one-off game, it requires a lot of coordination. On the opposite side, we've got Wargamer Fritz, where I love miniatures, Warhammer 40,000, Battletech. I love the scope of setting up a miniatures game, and we've got the action going on. We've got the tactics, but there's this moment where you step away. Theme music helps, too. You step away, and you've created something that exists outside of the mind, like a role-playing game. You've created something in the moment where it's a unique experience that you're engaged with and you're sharing with other people. Dungeon crawling board games kind of meet in the middle. You've got the rules, you've got kind of the leveling up in the RPG, you've got the miniatures, and you're creating that kind of chaos in a good way in the moment. Co-ops are great, but I feel like for the true tension, and Zombicide Black Plague and other games like that where we have a co-op mechanism, they work. They're a lot of fun. They create tension. But when we take things to the second step of having an Overlord mechanic, now we start to utilize tactics. And now we start to get into the game where there is some competition, but I feel like it's competition in a good way. And I feel like with an Overlord mechanic, there is less chance for your games devolving into shouting matches and less chance for your games kind of going absolutely crazy. So an Overlord mechanic is essentially, you have the players of the game playing their characters, that narrative. There's a mission, there's a story, and the Overlord is commanding the minions. The Overlord is there depending on the degree of involvement in the game. We're looking at something like Dungeon Saga, or we're looking at something like Descent. But even Conan, which I love, has that Overlord mechanic. Conan the board game, fantastic IP on there. Although admittedly, I love Conan. But as an Overlord, your job is to run the game, resolve the story, but effectively try to kill the players, to try and really destroy them. And this works. It takes a special kind of player to want to be the Overlord. This works because we have a social contract going in where this is the game, these are the rules. I'm going to do my best to really go against you. So you can be pretty mean against the party. Compare that to a role-playing game. Whereas the DM, you're there really a dungeon master, or the game master, you're there as a storyteller. Yes, you're going to throw some challenging stuff, but the party isn't there for you to just beat on for no reason whatsoever. Compare that to the opposite side of a war game. There really isn't any hard feelings in terms of wargaming because literally we're sitting down to try and blow each other off the table or out of the waters or in the cold vacuum of space. Where board gaming Overlord, I find it works, especially against other games that might have a kingmaker, where it's all four of us kind of playing or competing for some sort of worker placement. Someone pulls ahead. Some other people feel resentful because the dice didn't go or resources didn't work against you. I've been trying to draw some sheep for 3 rounds, and I can't on there. So tactically, what do we want to look at as the Overlord? And that's what we're going to explore in the next couple of series. But I wanted to lay the foundation as the Overlord. When I'm the Overlord, what I'm looking to do. And this is not going to be system-specific, game-specific, because the mechanic applies to all of these one versus many type games. The first is, I really don't know what the party is going to do. I have some ideas. I know some player personalities. I know the guys that I game with, so I know certain players, what they're going to do. But even if I'm sitting down at just a random pickup game, which I've done and I love. Board gaming is great for kind of introducing you to new players and new personalities and stuff and meeting people. I might not know your player personality, but I have somewhat of an idea of what you're going to do based on the character you pick, you pull, or you are assigned. Are you going to be a support character like an archer or a wizard? Are you going to be kind of a buffing character like a cleric? Or are you going to be a primary attack character like a dwarven fighter or a barbarian? That's going to help give me some clues as to what's going on. But even with that, and certainly that's going to modify my approach a little bit, but even with that, I'm not going to actively make any of those assumptions, because then I will be a passive player. Meaning, if I see that you're playing the barbarian and I try and chase you down, you may fall into my traps, you may not. I don't know what the other players are going to do. I'm expending resources in terms of minions that I'm drawing or activating, or Overlord cards or trap cards, whatever it's going to be in the game. I'm reacting to what you're doing. The party will always be in advance on there. What I want to do is kind of drop you into that dungeon, give you some chances, give you some ideas, set you literally to the middle of the dungeon, and then see who I can pick on, see what opportunity you give me. So let's look at this tactically. Imagine a dungeon set up, and as the players go, they kind of unlock and explore other pieces of it. At the start of the dungeon is smallest. Maybe you've got an entry room, maybe you've got 2 doors and a corridor. Maybe there's some minions there they're going to beat on, maybe there's some minions I can spawn. I don't want to tie them down at the start of the dungeon, because this is where they can be the most coordinated. This is where I'm going to force them to fight and work together. I might throw a couple of wastoid minions up there just to see what happens, just to see who reacts to what, who's kind of brave, who's kind of foolish on the dice. But I'm going to wait for the party to move into the center of the dungeon. Because in the center of the dungeon, for most of these dungeon crawlers, they don't know what the layout is. Even something classic like Hero Quest. Zargon, I've got the book, right? But you don't know how it's laid out on there. You might even have some ideas, but based on doors and what you can see, but you don't know how expansive it is. So if I pull you into the center of the dungeon, what this means is now you have places to explore. The party has places to explore, places to move, places to backpedal if things get really tough. If I can spawn or bring more minions on, either through bone piles, or if we're talking about descent, kind of the classic rules, the spawn points or places on the map where reinforcements can arrive. This is now going to allow me to pull reinforcements from the start of the dungeon, kind of catch them on the other side. So I'm literally catching them where the end of the dungeon they can't see, minions are pushing forward. The beginning of the dungeon, where now they've moved in a little bit, minions are spawning that way. It's forcing them to move around in the dungeon. Again, as opposed to just hitting them at the start of the dungeon and they have nowhere to go. So in this moving around, this is now going to give me a chance to see what they do. See who gets separated from the party, right? It's one thing to say, well, look, in a lot of these games, you just have to kill one party member and kind of the mission ends. So the wizard or the magic user class, they're the weakest, go beat on them. Well, maybe, yeah, if they let you, but no one's really going to let you do that. They're going to kind of protect that wizard. It's easy to protect that wizard, or it's easy to protect that weak or mission-critical character carrying an item if literally it's just the entry room with a hallway. But once you let them in, now they have room to maneuver. Now you have different ways to come in. And the other advantage that this has is at the start of the game, the players are their strongest. It's kind of this dual mechanic. The Overlord or Necromancer character, is at their weakest. I have a starting hand of 2 or 3 Overlord cards. I don't have many spawn points on there. I'm generating stuff as we go. Compare that to the players. They've got the maximum health and hit points. They haven't used up their spells. They haven't used their once per game abilities. True, they haven't found any magic items or stuff like that, but they're pretty strong. They're pretty intense. It's not to say I am going to throw stuff at them, but the chance for killing them on a lucky shot, the dice are what we want to embrace. Even if I get that lucky shot, it's not going to have much of an impact. So I want to be building up my cards. In some systems, it's like play a trap and characters take damage, or kind of an ambush, spawn 2 skeletons or 2 minions near them and attack. As we move to the middle of the dungeon and the middle and end of the game, now they've taken some hits. Now they've made a couple of mistakes. They're weak. They're vulnerable to getting hit with that trap card. And it can literally mean the difference between life and death. So I'm looking to build up my resources as we go. Hit them in the middle of the dungeon. That's the timer. Start throwing minions at them. Start throwing stuff at them and see how they redeploy. See where they go. And the character who is defended the least might even be the barbarian. That's who I'm going to look to target. That's who I'm going to look to isolate. That's who I'm going to look to take out. Now let's quickly talk about player personality. I'm not going to name any names here. But there's one particular guy, I love you. But playing, we always have a plan. His name starts with a J. We always have a plan, and we're going to do really, really well. We've got this game. Either we're going against the Overlord or it's a co-op mechanic like in Zombicide. And if there's a chance for loot, if there's a chance to gain something else, they go for it. It's like, Jay, you already have 2 Uzis. You only have 2 hands. You can't carry a third. You don't need it. So there's also this chance at some point, if there's a lot of room and stuff, someone will go off script. Someone will try to track down that loot. Someone will go off on their own. That's going to make it easy for me to isolate too. So as the Overlord / Necromancer, by giving them room in the center of the table, that opens a lot up there also. So this is that foundation tactic. This is what we're going to build on in the next 2 or 3 podcasts and vlogs, exploring this mechanic of being an effective Overlord.